Okay. Everybody had a chance to run through the minutes of last month's meeting.
Yes.
Any corrections noted?
No, it was a long.
It was long, but I thought it was, I think I might have seen one typo somewhere that I didn't even circle, so I'm good.
Yeah.
Robert? See? Okay. Can I get a, starting off, I'm way out of turn here. Got to approve the agenda. Anybody see anything on the agenda that doesn't suit them? I would entertain a motion to approve.
Oh, I'll second it.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Now to the minutes. Sorry about that. I didn't see anything. So if we're okay with the minutes, I would ask for a motion to approve tonight's minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's minutes.
I'll second.
Second. Lynn, thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Actually, it's the minutes from April 18th.
That's
When I
right.
said tonight's minutes,
Yeah,
I mean
yeah.
April 18th.
The
Okay.
minutes before us tonight.
Yes. We didn't do this one yet.
Okay, public comment. Wes, anybody sign up? Anybody care to speak out there? Public comment. Okay, old business is none. New business, two ZTAs before us tonight. ZTA 2205 and ZTA 2206. Wes, can I get you to start us off on ZTA 2205 and read the staff report?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The first application on the agenda tonight is ZTA-22-05 and is submitted by Stacia and Mark LeBlanc. The requested amendment is to amend the town zoning ordinance by amending section 36-202D6, maximum allowable lot coverage. The applicant is proposing the amendment in an effort to allow a maximum lot coverage of 35% provided that the total lot coverage does not exceed. In 2020, a certificate of occupancy/compliance was issued for a new single-family dwelling on property owned by the applicant located at 9 10th Avenue. In 2021, town staff observed that landscaping work had taken place at 9 10th Avenue that included additional concrete around the driveway, a concrete walkway, and a gravel walkway with stepping stones. After review of the as-built survey of the property, it was determined that the additional coverage exceeded the town's maximum allowable 30% lot coverage requirement as established in section 36-202D6. Since that time, town staff has discussed potential solutions to the lot coverage issue with the applicant and a local engineering firm. If approved, a maximum allowable lot coverage of 35% would be permitted in the town's RS1 zoning district for lots that are less than 20,000 square feet, provided that the total lot coverage does not exceed 6,000 square feet. In reference to the town's land use plan, town staff found that policy 2 is related to this request. With respect to a recommendation, town staff offers the following. During your consideration, questions and discussion should mainly focus on the ZTA and not on a specific property. The proposed amendments would apply to the entire RS1 zoning district. There are 847 residential lots that are less than 20,000 square feet in the town, which equates to about 28% of the total number of residential lots in the town. The lots are considered legally non-conforming with respect to lot size, and they can be developed provided that all other requirements can be met. including lot coverage. Historically, the town's 30% lot coverage requirement is applied to all lots in the RS1 zoning district, regardless of the lot size, since adoption of the town zoning ordinance. Town staff has determined that the proposed amendments are inconsistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan, and town staff recommends that the planning board recommend disapproval of the application to the town council. With respect to those 847 residential lots, I do have a map that was included in your packets. Just wanted to show that, make sure everyone had an idea. And I can leave that up in case anybody wants to continue to take a look at it. That concludes my report, Mr. Mayor, or Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Wes. The applicants are here tonight.
Yes, sir.
The LeBlancs, and I understand that you have a PowerPoint that you would like for us to look at. I would think that would be in order first.
Yes, sir.
And then we will do our discussion, and it's not going to be a back and forth. We're going to discuss this way, not this way. I mean, and it's going to be that way in the next ZTA as well. Try not to get too specific about the property, more the ZTA and how it affects the town. So with that, I would ask you all to come forward.
Well, I'm Stacia LeBlanc,
I'm Mark LeBlanc.
and thanks for hearing us out tonight. We appreciate it. We also appreciate Mr. Hackett's patience as we try to figure out. See, I did it again.
It's okay.
Haskett.
Wes Haskett.
Wes Haskett. Sorry.
What a way to start.
Yeah, anyway, so I just thought we'll try and make it quick, but just a little background. We decided to move to Southern Shores full-time in retirement. We bought the lot because we vacationed here all the time, and we decided this is where we'd like to live. And we love the beach. Our son loves the beach, and we hope we lure them here often. Southern Shores, because to us, it seemed like a more kind of residential community as opposed to vacation cottage neighborhood. And I think the reason for the hometown feel is that you will control, the density of development. So the beach is less crowded, the neighborhoods are less crowded. Oh, yeah.
That's what.
I probably would have gone for the mouse. Okay, sorry. So, we appreciate, and we also know now that 30% is held near and dear to the town council and planning board. But lot coverage was just complete news to us. None of the homes we've owned in our 40 years of marriage ever mentioned anything about lot coverage, so.
I should point out, and we're married, so we'll try not to speak over each other. But in any event, a lot of what we have in this thing is also found in our written submission, including what we think are land use plans and such that actually support the amendment. So you want to next slide.
Is all of that provided to the planning board? The memo and all that?
The information you submitted,
Yeah.
all of that was provided.
Okay, great.
Right.
So we thought it'd be nice to see in person kind of the house we built. And we have to say that really a lot of people have come and commented, neighbors, introduce themselves, but also make positive comments on our house, that it's more like a normal live-in full-time home as opposed to grand 3-story places with tons, or as we know, the campaign about mini hotels. And
This is really sort of a story and a half, really. The garage side is about a story and a half up.
'Cause it's a
one
split
story
level.
there. It's a
Yeah.
split level, right?
Yeah. So our lot size is on our survey says 17,365 square feet. We thought it looked like a pretty, and probably easy to build upon. But it was, we looked for tons of houses in Southern Shore and provided the storage and some garage and other things that you kind of want in a full-time
In
home.
proximity to the ocean.
And yeah, there was the other thing, we really wanted to live oceanside.
I mean, Chairman Ward, you indicate property centric necessarily. So we're going to try to move on for that. We do believe that this proposed CTA goes beyond just our personal interest.
Through how we got sand surrounding our patio was, and we're told can't have the patio because you're getting too close to reaching lot coverage. So over the winter, sand fence, which just constantly ripped down. We did have a lot of sand blowing into the pool was a problem. So we knew we had to do something around there. And we thought about, well, what if we just put sod or grass seed? And very practical mulch, of course, we got in the pool. In fact, we have some today from a storm that happened. Gravel, that, it's no fun to get out of a pool and step on bare feet in gravel. Artificial turf, which actually comes in permeable and non-permeable. We were told that it's very hot to the feet, so it's not comfortable. And then we also looked at something we had seen in town, which are large pavers, and then they have the grass going in between it. We went with the small pavers because popular around the pools, and even though we never really move around, and so that's why to begin with, and we'd always had it in the past.
I think it's important, though, to point out that and you might as well go to the picture, because that would probably.
Okay.
There was a 2-foot original poured concrete, and variegated sizes of pavers, which have joints in between them, which water infiltrates through, and then beyond that is gravel. So in terms of stormwater runoff and those things, we think we have a lot of things on the property that make stormwater management optimal.
Right. And we did try and keep it as minimal necessary, just so that we could have some, pool furniture around it. The other problems we had were the cutouts in the driveway and then the 10x10s turnaround, because my car bottomed out and I can't stay on the concrete, either when I'm going over that cutout or when I was trying to curve and back to the driveway to reach the road. So it's impossible to actually use as a turnaround. That for every single house, no matter where it sits, if it's a house on that dead end road, but it does take up lot coverage, and I mean,
It takes up lot coverage regardless of grass, whether it was made
Yeah.
of sand, whether it was.
and with some concrete, because that's what the driveway was made out, so we thought we had to have it concrete. And we didn't know what our lot coverage was, but I don't that it was up so close that 4 or 5 feet put us over the top. And Mr. Haskett did say, you could remove those concrete things and put in rock, and that would be okay. So that's something we're willing to do. I just haven't been able to get the guy here. So I don't.
And then we'll just go back one more. We'll move through this quickly. So we go the other way. There we go. So we had, when we had this done, the guy who filled in the little squares on the driveway said, hey, you want to walk away from the driveway? And we said, yeah, sure. So he did that. And then we had this done on the side, which frankly, we consider this walkway slows more water than grass, but it still contributes to lot coverage.
So even though it's gravel, the entire
Area of it.
area of it, including stone, counts against lot coverage. So it's not as if just the particular stones putting on top of it are what's counting against it.
Now we're here tonight, and called us. We were in a car driving through a rainstorm, and so we were talking to him, and he said, "You added concrete to the front of the house," and we said, "Yeah, we sure did." And then he said, "You've got pavers on top of the gravel walkway," and we said, "Yeah, isn't that okay?" He said, "No," and then he said, "Added concrete to the backyard," which was communication between us, because when he said concrete, we're thinking poured concrete, but he was talking about pavers, and the pavers are concrete. So we said, okay, well, that's where we're at. So where do we go from there?
Better
We
get-
get, as Mr. Haskett said, we departed from the, so we could see what we did. I mean, obviously, our most important part of our property is the area around the pool. So we retained surveyors and other experts and talked to a bunch of different people and said, what can we do? And some of them said, well, what you need to do is make your driveway all gravel. And we looked at that, but then we understood that even if it was all gravel, there's going to be an 8-foot drive aisle. I got this, Wes, please correct me if I've got this wrong, but in any event, an 8-foot drive aisle that would go from the street to the garage, and that would basically be a lot coverage issue regardless of what it was made out of. And then the 10 by 10 turn.
Parking spaces.
Yeah.
And so early as we were talking, we even came in for this grant program that Dare County has that provides money grant to, if you're willing as a resident in Dare County to convert your non-permeable materials to permeable materials, they'll finance a good part of that. So we applied thinking, because the engineers are telling us we can do this, and we didn't get it, but it doesn't matter because obviously it doesn't matter what our driveway is made out of, it's going to count against us.
So to get on to, you know, why is it just, is it more than our problem? What is it? So what we did next is we did a lot of research. We read the Cameron land use plans. We read a lot of the material in the 2015 code update project. And we looked at as well as looked at the EPA under the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, under Chesapeake Bay, and of course read a lot of planning board meeting minutes and saw sort of the history of this.
And other provisions in the code that will allow.
There we go. So just going back to this question about permeable pavers or gravel driveway, it's not available as a tool for homeowners. Gravel walkways are excluded, but not gravel driveways. We're not sure of the reason for that distinction. 25% exclusion for slatted decks. I think that was somewhat modified recently, being concerned whether it's attached or not attached. And then the town code only allows commercial developers, not homeowners, to use permeable materials to get a 7% increase in lot coverage, or I think up to about 70%. And if you look at NC state law, and I know that's maybe not the most effective argument here, but the NC law and regulations exclude gravel from built upon area. So we were starting with the as-built and all that.
So I guess the lot coverage seems to involve a lot of the environment. If the density of development is, to our mind, was really, what you can see, structures that are built on the property above the ground level that are impeding the open view and causing a lot buildings to be built close to one another and not encouraging that open space. But when we saw in the environmental regs that they define as-built structures to exclude, and they talk, they're more concerned obviously about the environment. So wooded slanted deck at all doesn't include anyone and doesn't include gravel, so long as there's a certain porosity. So we look at our problem, it's not density or obstruction of the view and enjoyment of the neighborhood, rather it's what we've put on the ground is the only thing that we're having a problem with. And we are more than willing to change the materials to permeable because it's worth that much to us to be able to go out in our backyard and enjoy it. But that's not available. And because we know the town councils, because at first when I researched, I thought ZTA 1804 was what the current standard was, and asked Wes about that, and he said, no, that didn't end up getting all passed. So then I got the correct section. But we figured if they just denied using permeable materials in residential areas, in
I think it was swimming pools and some other sorts of debate
gravel
about what
driveways and stuff.
I guess
We
we don't
didn't
need
think
to
that
say
would
that.
be, we didn't know think about that again so soon. So
And
that's why
it
we
would-
didn't go that
It
route.
would actually be a bigger we think it may be a bigger lift, I don't know. The house,
So the density is often the term used, but it really involves more than just structures that are built. It's, so I'm not sure. I appreciate that what we've put down, if that's the problem that is causing stormwater runoff, we've done a lot of things on our lot to manage that stormwater. And all of the eaves we have stone going around it. We have stone going around the little paver patio. We have stone going around the driveway so that rain that hits these hard surfaces go and are held for a period of time in the pores. So, but it doesn't, so far the town hasn't really, tried those same ways of encouraging the use of the.
so I know we just spent a lot of time talking about permeable products and all that kind of stuff, but what we're proposing is something that's much simpler and a non-conforming lot under the code. You should get a maximum allowable coverage of 35%, provided that the total coverage does not exceed 6,000 square feet. And then we do this try to do this math with this.
But we thought it's consistent with your current code, because right now, anyone with a 20,000 square lot has a maximum of 6,000 square feet lot coverage they can use, whether that's, pavers or the house or shed or whatever, that's the max. So we're not doing anything that violates your current standard already in the code in that percent.
Well, we came up with it because it works for us, but we also see that it also
No,
is.
it doesn't work for us.
Well,
We're
it
still
doesn't-
limited to 6,000 square feet.
Well,
Anyway.
it's not uncommon if you look at the nearby jurisdictions for smaller lots, anywhere from 35% to 50%. So it's not
That gave us the idea that maybe it wasn't for the town to apply this to non.
And again, as I think Wes noted, this would only apply in RS1.
And when we try to see, when you read that section that we're amending, the lot coverage, it doesn't say anything at all. It presumes you have a lot of 20,000 square feet and they apply the. Well, what do they do for these grandfathered lots? We're non-conforming. And in that section, it said apply with everything going forward, pretty much, except for these exclusions of 6,000 square feet, because that's what it currently is required if you have a 20,000 square foot lot. So the nonconformities section didn't, again, in that it doesn't specify that lot coverage is enforced against nonconforming lots.
Explicit about it.
Yeah.
It says it in the heading.
But it doesn't
uses
really say it in the
terms of
provision.
Bulk density lot coverage. When you read the actual act, it says nothing about,
It only says bulk.
it only says bulk. So
So we just thought there's some question.
We think there's a hole in the statute there, and that sort of brings us to why is this bigger than us? We've looked at the Southern Shores, North Carolina Town Code Update FAQs and other material that the town has published on its site. So the town is mostly built out. Yes, I think you mentioned it was 846 lots,
847.
847, and I looked at a spreadsheet that I think was produced at the April 2019 planning board meeting that figures come from, and I think the number may, with respect, be closer to 750, because some of those lots were community property things and townhouses and residential things.
Tennis courts,
And stuff like
playgrounds.
that.
Yeah.
I don't know that for a fact, but it could be less. And then, as they said, it's older, it's going to be redeveloped some way. People have problems redeveloping with the lot coverage things. And as it's been said in the town code update and other places, the regulatory flexibility and options are warranted and reasonable.
So we knew that, I knew that this 35% or any different number related to lot coverage in any way was going to be startling. And I think that there would be fear about it, which obviously we've seen the word that's out in the Beacon too, already complaining about it. But if you look at it to us, it's almost such a minimal impact that there's only so many vacant lots, only we saw for sale, and only a couple of them were less than 20,000 square feet. And I think most of the non-conforming, lots have been built out. I don't think there's going to be a rush of every homeowner coming and say, yay, let me add a pool. Hey, let me add a, screen porch or a deck or something. Maybe there could be, but we just felt it was a very small amount of people that were going to utilize this exception. So as we already explained, we thought it filled a hole because we didn't see it in the article. We didn't see it in the lot coverage reg. We didn't see it in Article 5 about non-conformance.
As a subject, requirements, among others, because they are out of date or confusing. So that's what the person says. And then, well, this was your question, right?
So why not ask for a variance? But just kind of through grapevine, we heard, the town never grants variances. So I don't know. So we thought, we looked at the criteria for it, and they seem to be rather high. And the one in subparagraph, like that might be a problem because the hardship didn't result from actions taken by the property owner. But that's something that we could always try for a variance, I guess. But it just seemed to us when we hear other people trying to do things to their home or property, they claim they're always up against this lot coverage. It's like very difficult to make improvements to the property. So just to summarize, I think we feel like change. We feel like it's not just going to help, but all the other people probably lived here for a very long time and have older homes and maybe want to renovate because we've heard about them just anecdotally. And and then it addresses what I think the concern was about these odd sized lots and their development and what would happen to them in the future. So I just feel like the flexibility is something that'd be a little bit of a gift to folks who have a smaller lot. So that is the end of our presentation.
Any direct questions to the applicant at this point before we start discussing?
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Wes, when you get situated there, can you bring up the lot coverage history that I've been keeping almost like a journal of? Okay, this comes from me, but I think I'm the longest serving planning board, longest serving planning board member up here. And anyway, I dug into lot coverage early on in my tenure here. Lots. And they kind of somewhat run hand in hand in certain regards. But if you look at the lot coverage history, the first zoning ordinance was in 1981. It passed with 30, but that's simply all it said. In 1995, it was amended to define lot coverage and lasted for 23 and a half years until September 5th, 2018. In that time period, Code Right was rewrite our code in general, but certainly zoning was a large part of the rewrite. We subsequently chose to go a different path, and we did not institute Code Right word for word. We are constantly picking at the high points and using them as suggestions, but we still are operating with the same code that we've had and has been amended over time. In that Code Right survey, and I didn't put this on this sheet, but I wrote it in for myself to speak to. In that survey in February of 2016, the question was asked to the recipients, should the town increase allowable maximum lot coverage? And in that, it was not, it might have been 1,000 respondents, but I'm thinking it was closer to 900, which something like that. In that survey of that question, 62% disagreed or strongly disagreed with increasing maximum allowable lot coverage. 30% agreed or strongly agreed that we should increase it, and 8% were undecided. September 5th of 2017, ZTA 1703, which was lot coverage, was brought to the town council with a public hearing, and it failed to move forward. And that action, I believe, Wes, was brought on by questions asked at the Code Right level. I think I'm right in saying that. But anyway, in that 1703 ZTA was brought before town council at a public hearing. It failed to move forward on a 3-2 vote. About a year later, July 10th of 2018, ZTA 1804 was up for consideration with the public hearing. And at that point, there was a lot of opposition in there, namely pervious materials and turf stone areas contribute to 50% lot coverage. Ultimately struck that provision. Gravel walkways shall not contribute to lot coverage. The planning board kept that. The outer eaves shall not contribute to lot coverage. We did away with that. Up to 500 square feet of the water area of swimming pools shall not contribute to lot coverage. The planning board took that out, or will take that out. Open slat deck allow water to penetrate through the pervious material not exceeding a total of 25% of the total footprint area of the attached dwelling shall not contribute to lot coverage. That remained in, and the next paragraph addressing that remained in place until last month when town council passed the revised ZTA 22-01, allowing for full dwelling footprint at 25% open slat decking credit to the lot coverage for existing and does not have to be attached. That was amended from when it had to be attached and done, and it couldn't include existing. So all that says that we are slowly relaxing lot coverage, but we're doing it very incrementally. Now, Wes, if you can pull up my calculations on the lot coverage the square feet per ZTA 2205, yeah. I just did some quick math on, the existing, and this would all be based on this ZTA before us tonight, 2202. It's a little bit misleading to think that it's only going to be 5% more lot coverage on any given lot, when in fact, if you start at the top, and there are some lots in Southern Shores that are 7,500 square feet. Correct, Wes? 7,500?
I don't know if it's exactly 7,500, but
1,000,
Yeah. I
at
think
10,000.
the sealed house on Duck Road was built on a 7,500 square foot
Okay.
lot, I believe. Anyway, at 8,000, just for round figures, if the existing lot coverage in today's ordinance is 2,400 square feet at 30%, if you jump to 35%, it doesn't increase it 5%, it increases it 16.6% over the existing 30% allowed. And it goes like that until you hit 17,365 square feet. And in this ETA, that would be 18,000 would be the cap. So you can see what happens as you go down in, up in lot size, you go down in the percent increase over the existing 30%. So, comments on any of that?
This has bounced around for as long as I've been coming to meetings, approximately 15, 20 years. And some of the arguments are the same that they were 15 or 20 years ago, that there's not that many existing lots. I heard that 15 years ago when we were doing a vegetation ordinance. And the argument was there's not that many lots left. But in effect, there are a lot of lots left. There were then, which I found out, and there are now. This ordinance would affect the entire town. What we're doing is putting more structure, et cetera, on a smaller lot, which in effect would make it, it'll take away from the environment to some degree. It'll also make the lots look crowded, closer together. It's against what the town code is, and what we've been trying to do here for the last 20 years is maintaining Southern Shores in its current atmosphere. And I think as far as we have empty lots that will be developed, and there's more going on now because of the, a lot of people purchased lots recently. The inventory is getting a little lower, but we're also going to have remodels, and we're going to have people adding. I just don't see how this helps Southern Shores one bit. I don't see any positive. It might help individuals, but it doesn't help the town as a whole. And my viewpoint is always looking at the town as a whole, not individually. So.
Anybody else? Linda?
I agree with Tony in that when somebody builds a house, I mean, they have to get approval and permits, right? So if they're over lot coverage, they should know that.
Or close.
Yeah, so I don't understand why it would be a shock and a surprise.
Right. Wes, can you pull that map back up again? And I'm looking over my notes. I did misspeak at 149 Duck Road. That lot was 9,000 square feet instead of 7,500, but 9,000 square feet. It's a small little house. And at the time, the builder had the opportunity to utilize a 12-foot setback because it was 50 feet or less. And in the non-conforming, lot discussion, the town decided to grant a waiver for 15 feet side setback for 12 feet. So that builder did not even utilize, he stayed with the 15-foot setback, and it has a swimming pool, a small pool, but it conforms to lot coverage.
Is that the smallest lot in town?
Now, I actually think there may be a 7,500 square foot lot, maybe up on Skyline, but I
It's
could be
close.
wrong.
I don't know.
And in that discussion, in the non-conforming discussion that we had in July of 2019, Wes had done, I've got notes on what you had told us. At the time, there were 3,037 total lots in Southern Shores. I had 846 or under, or 20,000 square feet or under. You had 847, I believe, that were legally non-conforming. Let's see, which is about 28% of all the lots in Southern Shores are less than or equal to 20,000 square feet. 241 are 50-foot wide lots that are part of a larger parcel, which we addressed in the non-conforming regulation that has been passed, which is about 8% of the total. Of these 241 lots, of the 50-foot wide lots, at the time, this is back in 2019, 28 are vacant, which would represent about 1% of all the lots. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
in the vein of our 25% open slatted deck allowance that was passed very recently, and the point that the LeBlancs made about the town allowing for pervious pavers and other engineered mechanisms to increase lot coverage for commercial property, I would look much more favorably toward moving to 35% if that last 5% were pervious pavers or some other engineered mechanism, very much like we've done with the open slatted deck situation. Still, of course, keep the 6,000 square foot maximum, but make some allowances for pervious pavements. But I disagree that it should be only for lots that are under 20,000 square feet. If you have a lot that's 20,005 square feet, why would you be penalized? I would say any residential, any lot in R1, 30% coverage, you can go to 35 using certain measures. And I realize that 4 years ago, the planning board and the town council removed swimming pools, other gravel driveways, and some other things that are fairly standard, as far as lot coverage exemptions. And so, as you said, I think we've got the open slatted decks in a pretty reasonable place to help the citizens rebuild, to add on, to build a new house in a smaller lot kind of thing. So I would be much more open to the idea of 35% if the 5% applied to every R1 lot and if it was pervious pavers, something like that. but that's not what y'all have brought before us, and I understand that, so, but anyway.
Any,
Well, to that, I would just say that pervious pavers, if they require a certain amount of maintenance interval, it's easier to enforce something like that on a commercial property than a bunch of residentials. So when you get to the engineer design for more permeability, if it requires maintenance, it's very difficult to.
I understand that. It's just that we're not talking about a huge parking lot that needs to be maintained to maintain that permeability. We're talking about a 10 by 10 deck next to somebody's pool. And if it gets clogged up, it gets clogged up. I'm not really as worried about that. I'm the maintenance of it, to be honest with you. I don't see it as big an issue with the residential park.
I think,
Oh, let me
Well,
finish
sorry.
one more thing, I'm sorry. As far as the interpretation, pavers that are on a gravel walkway, a stone paver on a gravel walkway, I don't understand why the entire gravel walkway is counted. And that's what you indicated. It seems like just perhaps the paver itself would be counted. But I think that interpretation is a little, it's up for interpretation.
well, at the planning board stage, when we took out pavers, the reason we took out pavers, I could make an example out of a house I built for my family at 54 Ocean Boulevard. There's a 10-foot round paver there, and there's no way in the world water's getting through polymeric sand that fills in the gaps of that paver. It's a compass rose, but,
Were those pervious pavers?
no.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. If you buy.
They were
pervi-
pavers,
If you
but-
buy, no, if you buy permeable pavers, water goes right through those pavers. And what Ed's saying is true. They can fill up with fines
Yeah.
and be less effective, but they're also laid with gravel between them. And so water does in fact go between them.
Well, and yes, I agree with you that there are, permeable pavers, and then there are some that are as hard as this.
Right, just regular pavers, right.
But we weren't necessarily 100% thinking of stormwater runoff either. And I don't think we are today. I think that aesthetically speaking, less is more, and I've always maintained that. And everybody sitting up at this table here has had to adhere to 30% lot coverage, and we've survived. I mean, we've made it happen. I think to tell someone like my family member that has 125 frontage lot that's got a lot of lot coverage, he wanted 5 more feet of swimming pool, and I couldn't give it to him. It was only 54 feet long. He wanted 60. So, I mean, how do you tell somebody, well, you get an extra 5%, or in this case, 16.6% more coverage on your lot? I don't agree with that. And-
Well, the thing is we're all in that position. Every developed lot was developed with 30%. And if we were to change it to say, okay, you can go to 35 if you have pervious pavers or if you have some other mechanism, that kind of thing, we're all in that same situation as your cousin.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now I can add a deck, or I can add a pool, or I can spend more or do more than I did when I originally built. Everyone's in that position.
Yeah.
And every time we make a change, just like when we made the change of 25% open slatted deck, a lot of people were like, good,
Well,
I don't have to tear my deck down.
But to refresh our memory, we as a planning board only wanted a net of 250 square feet, right? I mean, the town council rode over us, which is fine. I mean, that's part of their job, part of our job. But now, there's availability for open slatted decking around swimming pools, walkways, stuff like that, that you take the footprint size of the house, you can easily get 500 or 600 square feet credit of open slat decking. So it's relaxed the lot coverage by that amount, but I mean,
Yeah,
we're still at 30% with.
Yeah, but there is a 25% or, with the slotted deck. But the other thing we have to keep in mind is you're going to be tearing down more things. The smaller lots are going to look crowded, and I don't want to use Kitty Hawk as an example, but my God, you go down Kitty Hawk, you could shake hands with the people across from you and in the next house. And do we want to go in that direction, or do we want to maintain what the Southern Shores is? And I say, I am not in favor of knocking down more items. Pervious is fine. If you want to put it in originally, I think it's a great idea. But I don't think we should then start cutting things down, because now we could put pervious in. I mean, it's a back door of coming into something that I think actually environmentally is not good for the town. Aesthetically, it's not good for the town. You're going to be cutting down more trees. So I think aesthetically and environmentally, there's no plus to it. I don't see a plus to it at all in regards to those two things. That's what I said. I understand individually there's a plus, but not for the town itself. And I'm here representing the town and what I think is best for the town.
Well, I'll disagree with you about the tree business, because the people that want to cut down trees, they cut down every single one of them. And we can't do anything about that.
I tried twice.
Jan, I haven't meant to overlook you, but you blend in back
I'm
there.
just thinking of the engineering aspect as far as septic and drainage fields and, how that gets impacted by increased lot coverage on smaller lots. To do with, I think, Southern Shore, in terms of how our own services.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to say, the state that we're in, but, I kind of agree with Robert. If it's permeable, if water drains through it. But I also built 3 houses here, and I was restricted to 30% coverage each time.
And you made it, right?
And, yeah.
I will say,
It was hard.
I will say to
Variance.
the LeBlancs, I feel your pain, because Andy, is a builder. Ms. Collins just mentioned having built. Everyone that builds here is constantly watching, and like Andy has said, he built their house and it's probably 29.999% lot coverage. Everybody thinks like, oh, we need to reduce this sidewalk so I can add this. I'm going to cut out the middle of the driveway so I can add that. It's a game that most people that develop play, and I'm sorry that was something that y'all weren't aware of and able to play at the time you were building your house. It's unfortunate.
I would roll in with what Tony has said. We're very fortunate to live in Southern Shores. We were one of the earliest planned communities on the coast, and I take seriously what has gone on with the town code and the zoning ordinance as far as that 30%. It's been there since 1981. We've tweaked it around a little bit, and I think the open slatted decking was the biggest tweak that we've done, but it opens up a lot of opportunity to increase that lot coverage a little bit. But I don't think I'm in favor of just saying that the smaller lots get preferential treatment for getting 35% coverage when my guy that has 125 frontage wants more swimming pool. Like, I mean, really,
Well,
so,
this might give it to him. We want 35% for every lot.
well,
He could add 5 feet.
he can certainly utilize footprint and build a cabana out on the beach. So, I mean, I wasn't in favor of that. I'm still not, but I'm living with it.
That's what we did.
Anyway, any more discussion on where we're at with this?
I don't have any.
Anybody? Wes, have you got any input at all that we're missing?
No, sir, I don't have anything else to add. Other than when you all do make your recommendation, please do clarify whether or not you think the amendment is or is not consistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan.
Okay. I'm going to read the land use plan before I ask for a motion. The town's currently adopted land use plan contains the following policy that is applicable to the proposed CTA. Policy 2, the community values and the town will continue to comply with the founder's original vision for Southern Shores, a low-density residential community comprised of single-family dwellings on large lots served by a small commercial district for convenient shopping and services located at the southern end of town. This blueprint for land use naturally protects the environmental resources and fragile areas by limiting development and growth.
You need a motion?
Well, with no other comments, I would entertain a motion in regard to the ZTA before us tonight.
Yeah. I'll make a motion not to approve the ZTA 2205. It does not comply with the land use plan as stated.
Is there a second? Thank you, Linda. Second. Any discussion?
Nope.
None seen. Okay, I'm going to call for a vote. Please raise your hand. On the motion, all in favor of Tony's motion
Not
of not
approved.
approving ZTA 2205, please raise your hand. 5-0. Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your presentation. Believe me, I feel your pain to a certain extent, but we're not the last recourse.
I'm just curious because we actually wanted to come forward with permeable materials. And only have that be excluded from lot coverage and not increase lot coverage. But it seemed in the minutes from when you were discussing that ZTA in 2017, 2018, there were very few reasons for why, I could read in the minutes that said why you just approved it. And my take is that you think using permeable materials adds to the density, when actually, it seems to me, when we talk to engineers and everybody, they're always like, why? We have such a stormwater problem nowadays. We have so much flooding. Why doesn't all the jurisdictions try and ease that by using permeable materials? And it could be limited to only, that extra percentage only applies to a permeable product. And if we had an engineer come and analyze our lot, there's really no stormwater, because we went to great rates, to try and manage that. So I just don't understand why the town doesn't feel obligated to encourage the environmental management of our water runoff, the pollution of the sound and the ocean and other waterways and ponds. Why there isn't any inclusion of that when it seems like the statutes and all the environmental laws, even Chesapeake Bay, that's how we found out about permeable pavers. Is because the person in the A here used these. These are allowed all over Chesapeake Bay because they, manage stormwater runoff. They are compliant with the environmental laws. And I don't understand why there aren't any encouragement for better environmental management.
Well, we certainly, we appreciate all your presentation and what you're having to go through to rectify this. I would encourage town staff to work with you in any way possible, but this board does not feel like that this is the road we want to go down. So thank you all for coming tonight, and you're welcome to stick around.
We're having so much fun.
Okay, thank you. Anybody want to take a short break before we go for the next CTA?
I'm just going to get a glass of water.
Me too. Grab me one. Anybody else? Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Tony.
Yep.
Okay, Wes, I'm gonna ask you to read in the staff report, and after you get done, I'm gonna paraphrase John Finelli's comments or his letter, if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item on the agenda is ZTA-22-06. The applicant is Gene Guide LLC. The applicant's representative is Michael W. Strader Jr. And the requested action is amendment of the town zoning ordinance by amending section 36-207C conditional uses. The applicant is proposing a ZTA to amend section 36-207 to allow the group development of commercial and residential buildings as a conditional use in the C General Commercial Zoning District. The use will be permitted through the issuance of a conditional use permit or special use permit per 160D statutes. Section 36-207 currently allows the group development of commercial buildings only. Examples are the Marketplace and Southern Shores Crossing. Section 36-207 also currently allows residential uses, including detached single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, and accessory buildings. But such uses would be limited to only one principal building and its accessory customary building on any lot. If approved, the ZTA would allow group developments consisting of multiple principal commercial and residential buildings, subject to the following requirements. A, the minimum size of any building shall be 2,500 square feet. B, all buildings constructed within 35 feet of another building within the development are to be connected by a breezeway or covered walkway. C, lots shall be serviced by an existing community wastewater treatment facility permitted by NCDEQ DWR. D, residential density shall be limited to RS8 district allowances as established within section 36-203A. And lastly, E, No more than 40% lot coverage of the net parcel area can be associated with building footprints containing residential uses and the required parking for residential uses. As a side note, the following properties could potentially meet the proposed requirements for group developments consisting of commercial and residential buildings. 5391 North Virginia Dare Trail, Stone property at 7.9 acres. 5500 North Croatan Highway and Marketplace, 18.1 acres. 5355 North Croatan Highway, Southern Shores Realty Maintenance, 4.1 acres. And 6195 North Croatan Highway, owned by Gene Gate LLC, 5.2 acres. With respect to the town's land use plan, policy 2 again comes into play. And regarding a recommendation, questions and discussions should mainly focus on the ZTA again and not on a potential site plan for the proposed use. Policy 2 of the town's land use plan establishes the commercial district as a small district for convenient shopping and services. The land use plan also establishes that incompatible uses in the commercial area are limited to residential, low density, educational, and conservation activities. Since commercial and residential group developments will most likely consist of high density residential development mixed with commercial development, town staff has determined that the proposed amendments are consistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan. Town staff and Chairperson Ward have spent a considerable amount of time reviewing and discussing this application. As a result, Chairperson Ward has suggested additional requirements to be added to the proposed language that clarify the requirements for what could be termed as a new or a reworded use mixed group developments, and establish a 50% lot coverage requirement based on net acreage with the option of 55% if permeable pavement is used in excess of 5% of the total lot coverage. Town staff recommends that the planning board recommend approval of the application to the town council with Chairperson Ward's suggested requirements. That concludes my staff report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Wes. Well, I'm going to ask at this time if the applicant would like to address us.
Good evening and hello again. Appreciate the reconsideration of our modified text amendment, which we discussed at the last meeting. My name is Sumit Gupta. I'm representing the applicant. So, we're not here to talk about a specific parcel, but, what prompted us to apply for this zoning text amendment was in reviewing a particular property we own in Southern Shores. I think we all know what property that is. We've always thought it was a very important commercial property, and there's already very limited property remaining in the town. The plan was not to ask for anything, just develop it within the current rules, which we can. We designed on this property. We did some designs, and the idea was to do a group development in commercial nature, and really we can meet all local rules and regulations. The one thing, as we were looking forward to moving forward with that group development, which can only be done in commercial buildings currently, was the thought that it would be nice to take some of the allowable commercial space and trade it for residential. So any space we would be giving up would go to residential. We did not see that as an increase in density, but more of a substitute, taking commercial space and adding some multifamily. Our intention for the property we were looking at is it wasn't fitting in, although we desperately need workforce and affordable housing in the area. That wasn't the focus on the property we're looking at developing and had in mind. We were looking at doing more luxury multifamily. We developed, quote unquote, more luxury apartment community in Kill Devil Hills. It's leased out well, and there was over 10 families that moved away from the area some from Southern Shores, that did not have the housing style, but they wanted something nice. So they left the area in their retirement age and moved back. So they never wanted to leave. So just something that, although it doesn't solve the more price-sensitive, affordable housing, it's still something that we felt would be a good mix to the area, and this, if we can incorporate that. So that was the idea. Can we give up some commercial, bring residential? Started talking to Wes, had a few meetings with him. He didn't feel that it was, since both uses were allowed in this particular zoning, he didn't see it as inconsistent with land use plan, but we had to go through a zoning text amendment to formally go through that process and make it allowable. So we proceeded with that. Had several other meetings with some town officials involved and got input just to do our due diligence, making sure we have input. I think there was a good consensus that, multifamily, I heard a lot of positive feedback from, the idea of adding multifamily into group development. At the last meeting, there was a concern raised as far as, what if, this is just about residential and doing more and taking this and putting one little ice cream shop or a small thing in commercial and doing the rest in commercial, doing very limited commercial and using this to do really just more on the residential side. I think it was a fair point. I think there's two limiting factors. One is there is now, I believe that's gone through all the way, but there's now a density limitation of RS8. So there's you're still limited to the 8 acres of net acre, there's a limiting factor there. Also, in our updated one to address that, we thought the best would be to limit the total residential to no more than 40%, which is what's allowable right now anyway. So if we did nothing else, we'd be limited the residential footprints and parking to 40%, which is what's allowable right now. So the only extra we could get in this, because you're allowed to go to 60% and 60 or more than 60% if you use permeable pavers, so that remaining can go into commercial, but only that net over 40%. We thought it was a good way to address at least some of the comments that were brought up at the last meeting. And I just want to emphasize, whatever decision is made is perfectly fine. If this amendment doesn't go through, I think what we're going to proceed with is a commercial development, follow all the rules. And we're still going to do something, try to do it consciously and do it in a way that meets the code and the ordinances. I think if this goes through, we would really consider and would like to add residential components, trade some of the commercial and give it into residential. I don't see, again, this is an increase in density. I don't feel that the addition of multifamily and trading from commercial should penalize in the lot coverage. I know right now there was a recommendation to go to 50%, and I can, at least from our consideration on the property we're looking at in Southern Shores, that wouldn't work. We would just build out commercial and not give up our commercial density. It's just simple as that. But if we can mix in residential, then our goal would be to mix in, and it will be limited to our 8 units per acre, net acre, and it still wouldn't go over 40% of coverage for the residential component. Another, it mentions in here net acre. So there's two things, I guess, there's a recommendation to go to 50% lot coverage instead of the 60%. And it says net acreage. So that's another change right there. So currently the commercial is not net acres. So again, that would greatly limit our lot coverage from existing property what we want. So it just wouldn't make sense for us. Maybe it's still something good to go through. Maybe it's still, it wouldn't change our position. It would defeat our purpose for bringing in residential and the whole purpose of this text amendment. I think those are the points that I just wanted to clarify. And of course, I'm here to answer any questions you guys may have or, yep.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Gupta, can you bring up the crude drawing that I've had for tonight's meeting? And I'll get you to help me understand. Can you spin it around? Yeah, there you go. We all have this same drawing or sketch or whatever you want to call it, rendering in our packet. And I'm trying not to be site-specific at all, and we really need to try to maintain that when we're talking about this, because this is not for the applicant, but for the entire town. So really need to keep it addressed to no more hypothetical than a rectangle. In that rectangle, it's 200,000 square feet. Just, what is it, 800 feet on the front and back, 250 on the side, gives you 200,000 square feet. In your ZTA, the number E, no more than 40% lot coverage of the net parcel area. Can you describe what that would be on that drawing right there? Is that 40% that I've got there, which is 80,000 square feet?
So the intention would be that, so you got the 200 square foot parcel, 200,000 square foot parcel right
Correct.
there.
I mean,
So
that's just
right, just
hypothetical,
right,
yes.
hypothetical property, right? So on that, under the group development, we can do up to 60% lot coverage
Right.
off that 200,000
if it's commercial.
if it's all commercial group development.
Correct.
Yes, a little bit higher with the pervious paver, right? So that comes to what, about 120,000 square feet,
You
right?
got it, exactly.
If it was under this, then what we're saying is no more, so that's 60%, right? So what we're saying is 40% or no more than 80,000 square feet of coverage on the whole parcel, right?
Right.
Could go beyond residential footprints and associated parking. If we max that out, that would still leave us 20 to a little bit over 20% for commercial. If we did no commercial, then currently I believe you can go up to 40%. So it's the same 80,000 square feet. So just thought it was a good cutoff point right there to kind of still be within the 40% of that.
So by your logic and what this ZTA item E is telling us is that of that 40%, no more than 40% may be used as residential. You still get to put 60% footprint on that 40%? Is that what you're saying? Because I think that's what the ZTA
Well, no,
says.
I'm not necessarily, the way I'm thinking through it, the way I'm understanding it, or at least where the intention of it is to just take the whole 200,000 square feet, right? And saying no more than 40% lot coverage can go on that 200,000 square feet.
It's not lot coverage, it's actually 40%. You couldn't use any more than, what is the figure up there? It's 80,000 square feet at 40% of that parcel.
Yes, so no more than, if we can do 120,000 square feet of coverage, for simple,
If
right?
it's commercial,
No more than 80,000.
if it's all residential.
Well, let's just say mixed use. So if we can cover 120,000 square feet under mixed use, allow residential, out of the 120,000 total coverage, 60%, no more than $80,000 out of that 120 could be residential. So no more than 40% of the total lot coverage, which is 67% or 60%, could be used as residential. I don't know if.
So where is my example and your example different?
Are you saying 2/3 would be residential and 1/3 commercial? Basically.
That would probably be the maximum residential, right? So if you use, I would say no more. So you could go and do 20% residential, right? And not use up all the, up to 40%.
However, today's market, I would think you're gonna make more money if you went more on the residential side than you did the commercial. And not only that, but for our benefit, I think, as far as traffic in and out, we would behoove more the residential than commercial, depending on what happens with, you know, the economy, and products and everything else in the future. In other words, what are you gonna put there that's gonna bring in commercial?
Our plan would be probably be closer to 50, out of the total 60% lot coverage, right? Our plan would probably be closer to being 50-50, somewhere in that. But the reason we said 40% was it was just, that's what the current allowable max is for residential anyway. So it was like that, maybe that fits right there. So that would allow us to do, out of the total 60%, you're right, that would come then, if we maxed it out on residential, which would be still limited to 8 units per acre, for the, that would max out at, so that would be about 2/3. So 40%, which is more than half of the 60%, right? 2/3 of that would go into a residential, would be the max on that, is what we're proposing.
Are you limited by the engineered septic sewer that is there as far as the amount of residential that you can have?
There's plenty of sewer to do more over there than the allowable 8 units per acre. And there's plenty of sewer to do what we have intended on the commercial space as well.
You good? Well, getting back to what I'm trying to clarify here is, by your proposal, no more than 80,000 square feet of that footprint may be used, which is 40%, may be used as for residential footprint. However, you're wanting 60% lot coverage for that 80%. You're saying to treat the residential, the same as the commercial and make it all 60%. So of that 80%, that is 40% of 200,000 square feet. Of that 80%, that would be no more than 80%. No more than 80,000 square feet. You want that portion 60% as well, rather than 40% lot
I think this
coverage.
is, so, and excuse me if I'm not understanding, I'm trying to understand right here. So the idea is that right now you can do 60% lot coverage, not necessarily separating the sites out, right?
Sure.
Just 60% of the total,
That's
which is
easy.
120,000
Yeah,
square feet.
That's easy.
Out of that 120,000 square feet of coverage, which totals to 60%, no more than 80,000 square feet could be residential, parcel wide, on the whole parcel. So when you look, and when we have to show an engineer, we'd have to show, take our 60% coverage, 120,000 square feet. Our engineers would have to show the town staff that take all the residential footprints, take all the residential parking associated with it, that cannot be more than 80,000 square feet, which would leave us 40,000 square feet on the remaining commercial, under that scenario, if we maxed it out.
But what I'm getting at is, of that residential footprint, you can go to 60% lot coverage rather than 40%. If it was two different parcels, commercial, residential, if that was a standalone residential, you'd get 80,000 square feet of lot coverage. If it's commercial, you get 100 120,000 square feet of lot coverage. But I think what I'm understanding is on the residential side, you're still able to use 60% lot coverage. And if it was all residential, right, like it's drawn right there, then 60% of that 80,000 square feet would be allowed as a residential lot coverage.
I trying to follow, if you have one parcel, I don't think under any circumstance you can do more than 40% of that property as residential. So I'm not understanding how that goes to 60%, maybe. So if it's just one parcel, because if you separate the parcels out, you're back to limited to 40%. So we're just saying if you treat it like one big parcel, that we would not be allowed to do more than 40% coverage. If we had no commercial right now at all, we would just be limited to 80,000 square feet on that property right there. And in this case, if we did commercial group development, we'd still be limited to 40% residential, and we could use the additional 20% to do commercial. Again, maybe it's I'm not understanding.
Basically, to boil down what you're asking in this ETA is for the whole project to be at 60% lot coverage, regardless of how much residential is actually used. Right now, you could do 5% residential and 95% commercial, and you'd still be at 60%.
Right, or 0% residential, and right now, yeah,
Correct,
right.
But if you maxed it out at 40%, say it was 35%, forget 40%. Say you wanted to use, your model showed that 35% was better than 40%.
Sure.
So what does that calculation look like? 35, 65?
Well, then that would change residential. From our planning, that works. But, and that's something I can tell you, from just, if that were to be 35% instead of 40%, it would still work for us on our particular property to make it work. The only reason we brought 40 was it seemed to be just consistent with just already the RSA 40%. And it also worked within our goals. I can't say the 35, the 35 wouldn't work for our particular motivation and purposes.
But what you're saying is your ZTA says there's a cap at 40% for residential use, not lot coverage, use. Lot coverage is, we're talking about two different animals here. Once you get that no more than 40%, but of that, in this example again, at 80,000 square feet is no more than that amount can be used as the footprint in this example, correct? So that's
So
part.
40%, no more than 80,000 square feet of
Can be used
impervious
as
covered
residential.
area for buildings and parking, yes.
Can be used as residential
Right,
use.
right.
But you still can cover that 80,000 square feet.
That's not what the language
Well,
says.
well, then what is different?
Yeah.
If you plug in what I've got there,
Yeah, if we use your exhibit,
yeah,
what the proposed language says is that the project is limited to 60% lot coverage.
correct.
Obviously, you can go up with permeable pavers. So
If it's all commercial.
regardless of the mixed use, 60% is the maximum. The condition that we've added in there based on the last meeting was we were trying to control the amount of residential use. So of that 120,000 square foot of built upon area, no more, any residential use could not exceed any more than 40% of that 120,000. So it's
Which
not a
would be-
plus like what you and I think Mr. Finelli was picking up on too.
Yeah.
We're not trying to go above 60%.
Well, I think Robert, I mean, he was part of the discussion. I talked with Mr. Finelli. Certainly had some input about ratios and so forth. So go ahead, Robert.
That's the clarification that is covering. We talk about lot coverage, this 800 by 250, and we talk about how many square feet are happening right there. But it's the building square footage and the use square footage, those two ratios that influence the built upon area. If if it's all commercial, if it's 100% commercial, the other thing I'd like to say is that these buildings are not distinct, right? We're not talking about a commercial building or a residential building. We're talking about a building that may have commercial and residential within it, right?
So we're not under this approach right here is, it's, again, what we were planning, it was separate buildings, kind of all on one property. There's some shared drive aisles, things. It's all one big mixed use. But the distinct residential buildings, their footprints, their parking, we're proposing cannot be more than 40% total
Of the parcel.
of the total parcel.
But what you're asking is for 60% of the whole project, if it's mixed use, correct?
Yes.
Well, we're going to have a discussion about that, and just as long as we have a clear understanding of what that means, everybody understand? Okay.
Yeah.
I think we have to have an ordinance that would cover a situation where a mixed-use parcel is developed with both uses in one building, which means we have to account for the square footage that's built, the use, and then look at the lot.
It's under this circumstance, if you did a mixed-use building, it would still count, it would count as residential because and we can clarify that right there. So basically anything with residential square footage in there would, and maybe that's not clear on this way right here, it could certainly be clarified, would fall under residential structure, that footprint and the associated parking, which couldn't go more than 40%. So yes, just like group development of commercial buildings, we can go to 60%. We can go to a certain height. We can go to a certain volume, that gives a certain volume of space, that maxes it out, whatever, right? And we're still proposing to keep all that the same. We're saying that is, this would allow a certain percentage of that to be residential. And particularly how it's limited is by the 40%. No, out of the 67% total, 40%, or roughly more than half, could go as a maximum to residential use based on footprint and lot coverage.
And if you were to use your proposed language, it seems to me that if it were 50% residential, 50% commercial, then that probably, they are uniform, they match one another. But under this scenario, what you're saying about if you were to enact 50%, you're almost encouraging more residential development, like Jan was saying. So that would be favorable for his application if he was planning on doing greater than 50% multifamily.
But you suggested a 40% residential
We're
cap, which is,
limiting ourselves.
I'm fine with that. I mean, I think we're all okay with the 40% cap. Where I'm struggling with is you could do all residential or you could do all commercial, and you get a lot less lot coverage with residential. We understand that. You get a lot more with commercial. We understand that. But what you're asking us as a town is to mix those two together and still allow 60% lot coverage or 67% with the use of pervious material. And I think that is my sticking point with what you got going on. So anybody got any more questions for them, because I want to read John Pinelli's letter, since he's not here and he's impacted. Go ahead, Tony.
I just have a comment concerning the ZTA, and I look at loopholes. If I wanted to do something, whenever I look at any of these, I look, what is the loophole in it? And I think there's a loophole built into this that I would suggest altering. 40% is great. I have no problem with that. But it says no more than 40%. And you, on your statements twice, you said, you used the word some residential, and then you said not over 40%. But we're not talking, I think it would be more clarifying and cut away a loophole of what is no more than 40%. Then we could go down legally and say, I got 2%, because we're not going over that 40%. I would suggest to cut out that loophole that appears to be in here for the town. This isn't your parcel, we're talking town-wise. To cut out that loophole, I think we should do something like not less than 30% nor more than 40%. Something in that vein.
Put in a minimum.
Put in a minimum, because that way you structure the ZTAs for the future, and you cut away, because we had a lot of discussion and you agreed to 40 and 60%. Are we going to have that discussion if somebody else wants to do it? So if we put a 30 to 40%, that's just a hypothetical I'm throwing out number wise. If we do something like that, we're then protecting the ZTA from future alterations, appeals, or disgruntlement if somebody comes in and puts a 2% in. So that's what I say. Otherwise, you complied with a lot of the things we talked about last time. You altered it. But I think that might be something to consider. Just to take away, I look at loopholes all the time when I read these things. And how can I get over on this? And that's how, if I was taking this legally, I could get over on it, because this is 40. Okay.
Could I comment on that?
Pardon me?
Can I comment on that, or?
No.
Sure, yeah. Go ahead. Absolutely.
No, it's a good point. I mean, all these things are very, it does open the door, and you got to think through this carefully. I think if someone was going to do 2%, they probably wouldn't do any and just stick to the commercial thing. If somebody did 10%, I just trying to think, I don't know if it's necessarily bad. It's still a few little units. Maybe it's some housing for the shops or something. I think that maybe a minimum, so not thinking about just our property, thinking about just maybe good development, maybe it's 20 to 40% or something. Give it a little bit of a range where 20% is still significant, but you can't put, 1 or 2 units there at 2%. If you're going to do residential, it needs to be substantial enough to do. I would say maybe, 20 to 40%, just for my 2 cents right here, could make sense if you're going to go this route. I know you got, there's going to be a discussion on total lot coverage. I get it. It's a good discussion. I'm just saying, before I just shut up now and you guys deliberate, is losing the 65% going all commercial, bringing in residential, which I think is favorable, but then being penalized for lot coverage because we're bringing in residential. If you look at the surrounding towns, most of their commercial, which allows residential, you can go to Corolla, you can go to Duck, you can go to Kitty Hawk, you can go to Kill Devil Hills. Most of their commercial mixed use is 60%. We're doing right now in Manio, one right now that's going, that you actually can go from 60 to 70% by putting retail below, right? So 70%. So all those cases right there, it's kind of, I see this as a commercial development. And in any way, to make this work from my side. So the lot coverage is very important. And the other thing is, it's not net acre right now. It's a big, big change right there that's been brought up as well, not just the 50%. So it wouldn't work for our particular thing, which is where we're not only here for that, I understand that, but I want to be very clear on that, whatever is decided.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else have anything for that? before we get going. Okay. Let's see, Wes. I guess I would ask everybody to look at the, what I put together in conversations with Robert and John Finelli, the recommended additional conditions. But before we get into that list, I want to note John Finelli, who is our ETJ official, and so Martin's Point is not here tonight. He wrote a letter to the planning board. You all should have had that in your packet. I'm not going to read the whole letter, but I do want to read in a couple of pertinent takeaways. I'll go down to the third paragraph, and I'll read that whole paragraph. Right now, the owner-developer has the right to develop their property as residential, commercial, or to subdivide the property and have a mix of residential and commercial lots. So this isn't about mixed use. This is about density, and increased density doesn't benefit anyone other than the developer. The next paragraph, he goes on to say, higher density means more noise and light pollution going into the residential areas of Martin's Point and Southern Shores. Next paragraph, it says, it will be very difficult to make a left-hand turn from this property onto Highway 158. And then right again into Martin's Point, where they will be using the parking lots in our commercial area as a turnaround, which is a big concern for this particular piece of property. But I'm just reading John's letter. Most communities which offer mixed-use group developments have minimum standards on the amount of development that must be dedicated to residential or commercial. A minimum of 25% residential is the most common number. So that would address your concern, Tony. And then he goes on to the bottom. He's got his conditions, but he says the maximum allowable lot coverage shall be or should be 50%. Mixed-use group developments which incorporate the use of permeable pavement could potentially glean out 55%. So that was pretty much John's statement and his concern about, once again, this particular piece of property, which we don't really, this isn't part of our purview up here tonight, is how traffic goes in and out of there. I would suggest that when this gets to town council eventually, that they put a traffic study requirement in there. But anyway, for tonight, we'll leave that one alone. Now, on what I put together with, like I said, with my conversation with John and with Robert, this was in the ZTA. The A is minimum building size. B is buildings constructed within 35 feet of another building within the development or to be connected by a breezeway or covered walkway. C, lot shall be serviced by an existing community wastewater treatment facility permitted by NCDEQ DWR. D is residential density shall be limited to RS8 district allowances as established within section 36203A. And that density is 8 units per acre. That was voted on by town council at their last meeting, and that is the regulation in the RS8 is 8 units, 8 dwelling units per acre. And then E is no more than 40% lot coverage of the net parcel area can be associated with building footprints containing residential uses and the required parking for residential uses. If you look back at the sheet that has the recommended additional conditions for mixed-use group development, these are all 1, 2, 3, and 4 are directly from the RS8 statute. Minimum front yard setback is 25 feet. Minimum side yard setback is 15 feet. An additional 5-foot yard adjacent to the street is required for a corner lot. Minimum rear yard setback of 20 feet. Then maximum building height shall be 35 feet measured from the average of the existing undisturbed grade at the building corners. And then this is out of the commercial, which we are mixing or blending together with residential or RS8. No building or other facility such as parking areas, incinerators, trash collection areas, etc., shall be located nearer than 50 feet to boundaries of residential districts. Item 6, where a mixed-use group development abuts a residential zone, a buffer of dense vegetative planting or natural vegetation is required. See requirements in section 36-207, dimensional requirements, number 8, and it goes on to require quite a bit of different plantings and native species and so forth. So those are not in this ZTA, and if it is redundant to what's there already, my apologies, but I think it needs to be included in this ZTA. And then getting down to the nitty-gritty of the whole thing is the lot coverage for mixed-use group development. This language incorporates the applicant's lot coverage proposal in ZTA 2206 and is no less restrictive than what is currently being proposed by the applicant. See the sketch for clarification. Maximum allowable lot coverage of the net parcel, section 36-57 definitions, net acreage. Principal use in all accessory structures in the aggregate for the entire mixed-use group development shall be 50%. Mixed-use group development which incorporate the use of permeable pavement as outlined in 36-2075C in excess of 5% of the total lot coverage shall be allowed a maximum allowable lot coverage by principal use in all accessory structures of no greater than 55%. End of recommended additional conditions for mixed use group development. Comments? I don't think anybody would have, on the applicant side, would have any problem with the dimensional requirements for the RS8 and the C general commercial district. Did anybody see any problem that would be more restrictive than what they're asking for by including the dimensional requirements? Okay. Does everyone understand what net parcel area is? I'll read the definition. Net acreage means total area to be developed minus any area covered by waterways, marshes, or wetlands. In the RS8, the net acreage comes into play. In the commercial, it does not. Is that correct, Wes? I think the applicant has told us tonight that that would be a problem, that if we use net acreage.
Yeah.
But if I think they're asking us for a mixed-use group development. There's got to be some give and take. It can't all be designed after the commercial side. It's got to be designed using the residential RS8 as well. So
That was one of my questions before. How do you calculate, Wes, this would be to you. How would you calculate 60% commercial and then 40% residential? How would you calculate, like the walkways? What are they, commercial or are they residential? There's a lot of things, and this would go on to you. What would you do? How would you do these calculations?
I wouldn't do the calculations. An engineer or surveyor would provide.
Good
the
answer. Good answer.
I would just,
sitting on the second row.
I would just confirm that the calculations are shown and that they are correct.
Okay.
There would be one calculation if it were approved the way that they presented it. There would be one calculation that shows the residential building footprints and required parking spaces. That number, it'll say X at 40, no greater than 40%. And then commercial, it would be commercial coverage. That would be a different square footage, and that would not exceed 60% or 67% of the area.
I think your question may be, are they using 60% and they're including the residential in with the 60%?
Yeah, but
And so what's happening is they're getting a gift of 10% kind of, not a gift, but
they're able to use, or they want to be able to use the net acreage
Yeah.
as the commercial would allow.
right.
And
Plug in residential.
And then use the 60% up to 67% as the commercial allows. And there's no reciprocity with the commercial side of things. It's all slanted towards the commercial use is the way I'm seeing it. Robert, you put together some calculations that I took some of this off of, but in the end, 50% sure seemed like a pretty good compromise.
It does. The calculations I did had to do with first applying the percentages of commercial versus residential square footages. Obviously, there's building footprint, but it could be 3 stories tall. You come up with those percentages, and then you apply that to the actual lot, and do the 40-60 with that. 50 is a compromise. It's definitely if you look at the percentages of residential, commercial, it's definitely a sliding thing up to the 60 and 67, or down to the 40 for the group development. It's a bit of it, and coming up with a single number is much easier than trying to have a table of, ranges, which is what I try to do. And I looked back at it, and most of what we're talking about, like 20 to 40% residential, that kind of thing, we're definitely in the fairness ballpark of the averaging.
Well, I think also that 40% residential is reasonable in that with 8 units per acre on that 40% residential, if we cap it at that amount of residential use on the whole parcel, then it's, for lack of a better term, less heads in beds. It is a population density that we're talking about. If it was all residential, it would be a lot more, population density. What we're looking at is, physical density, what we see on the property. Anyway.
Mr. Gupta's description of other commercial, mixed-use, commercial residential developments really has made me think about the idea of, if it was a commercial development and the whole thing was commercial, you would have 60+% lot coverage. And the truth be told, I would rather have apartments upstairs than another, Kitty Hawk Heights. No offense to those folks, but you know what I mean? We don't need another wings upstairs. We need more apartments. So I would I'm tending to be more generous in the lot coverage for that kind of mixed use, as long as it's in the same area. That to me is true mixed use of having commercial or retail on the first floor and apartments upstairs. And in that case,
I don't think this ZTA would differentiate between that type of residential use or not. I mean, what we're looking at here is really three scenarios on a piece of property. Is a commercial piece of property is all residential, all commercial, or mixed use. In all residential, on this example that of 200,000 square feet, you can use 80,000 square feet as residential. At the commercial use, this is of the acreage, not the net acreage. The residential is net acreage. If it was all commercial, it would be the footprint of the total parcel. And then the discussion at hand is, if it's mixed use, should it all be slanted towards the commercial? Once again, I think not. But that's just my opinion. Anybody got any, thoughts about?
I just want to clarify something
Yeah,
that
Jane.
Robert said about the mixed use being commercial on the bottom and apartments upstairs. I think I heard the possibility that they would be a separate building for residential and then a separate area for commercial. So it's not a given that you're going to see.
right. Right.
Well, and once again, that's site specific rather than looking at this as potentially being used in these other acreage areas within Southern Shores. And that's why we're looking at this. It's not, the applicant wants us to grant a mixed use, wants the town to grant a mixed use. But
So Andy, go over one more time, again, about the depth of the land. Because there is a lot of water there, there's a lot of marshland. And I think,
once again, site specific, but if there were other parcels that had similar situations, the net acreage is spoken to in the RS8, but it is not addressed in commercial. So what Mr. Gupta is maintaining is if he did all commercial, they could get up to 67% if they use permeable pavement. But if it was all residential use, which would be a possibility, then the net acreage would discount the waterway, the marsh, the wetland. That would come off the total lot size.
Setbacks are current as far as.
Right. In the RS8 and, but there's no, in this ZTA, it's very simplistic from their standpoint, but it's more involved than the first one we saw. It keeps getting better. I mean, this is number 4 here that we've looked
Is there
at.
anything that we need to address in that arena as far as?
Well, I feel strongly that the dimensional requirements per the RS8 and the general commercial district need to be in place. And that would be a recommendation that I would make going forward if we decide to do that tonight. But
So commercial townwide would have net parcel area would apply to commercial.
no, I mean, at this point, Wes, there's no language about net in any commercial development.
Correct. Why not? Why shouldn't there be? Since
Good
you've got a
question.
situation, you're trying to put them both
Well,
together.
Yeah,
It doesn't make any sense. if we
Well,
don't have language.
It's not in the ordinance.
it may be something that we want to address for sure. Absolutely.
This is crazy.
Anyway, with the other 2 constraints, and 50% is in my mind meeting halfway with a mixed-use development, because in essence, we're being asked to create another zoning district within the existing C general commercial zone, right? It's a conditional use, but in effect, we're creating another zoning district. It's a big ask to do that, and I think we're all in favor of mixed use. But it's somewhat got to be on our terms too. Many towns in North Carolina have created standalone mixed-use districts. And these districts have their own set of parameters as to how the mixed use would affect the town. Kind of like our RS1, RS8, RS10, commercial, government. It's all different districts, and lots of towns in North Carolina have a mixed use district in their ordinances, but and it might not be a bad thing to look at down the road, but for what we're looking at tonight, we're looking at a ZTA, and I think that the applicant is in disagreement on 50% for mixed use. So
We're kind of stuck at this point. I think the applicant has put in numerous ZTAs. Is this the 4th? Did I hear that right? Is this the 4th ZTA?
4th version, I don't know
Fourth
if this would
version?
actually be the 4th ZTA.
And I feel like every time he comes here, we're saying, well, this is what we have to do next. I think what we should do as a planning board is to come up with something concerning the lot coverage, concerning the residential minimum amount, which I think would be an important thing. Otherwise, he's been complying with everything we've asked so far, where it's pretty much, I say, you've been pretty much changing the ZTA for trying to comply with what we're saying, and then we come up with something different. So I just think we ought to decide as a planning board the amount of lot coverage for this mixed use. Create the, do that. Have that in place. Otherwise, I feel like we're just going in circles for the last couple of times.
I agree. I think it's, been circular, but at the same time, if you're looking for loopholes,
There's loopholes.
well, I'm just saying that the dimensional requirements may be redundant, and I've talked to Wes about this. And why not have them in there? I mean, I don't know as the applicant would
Yeah.
disagree with putting those dimensional requirements in there. The sticking point is how we feel about lot coverage.
Yeah.
And John Finelli is on paper for 50%. I think Robert was pretty close in there as well, speaking with Wes back and forth quite a bit. That was just my thought was it however they want to use mixed use, mixed group development, 50% lot coverage would be
Net parcel.
of the net parcel
Net parcel.
would be reasonable. And, this board, I think, as well as the town staff, would be in agreement that more needs to be included in ZTA 2206. I think if the applicant would be in agreement with these recommended conditions, if 50% lot coverage of the net area is what the board deems as appropriate and fair, then I think our board would be inclined to recommend approval. Jan?
I have one other question, and that is about, I brought it up last week, was about a service road. How are we going to,
Site specific again, but
but still,
Yeah.
and it could be, again, universal for any, future development, how the traffic flows. In other words, what is the impact
sure.
on the main road? And is that also, again, part of this is, is that something that we get with, the highway or is it a town road? And is it, do you come out to that light? Is there a street that goes into the, the side?
I think we would certainly be remiss if we didn't at least suggest to town council that there be a traffic study done on this.
Right.
And I think early on, Mr. Gupta had said that he would be reasonably in favor of that back in earlier meetings. But
passing a mixed-use ordinance with general provisions that we've talked about, such as the setbacks, the dimensional requirements that you mentioned, and then a range of percentages of residential, that kind of thing. And a maximum allowable lot coverage. If we pass something like that, it leaves applicants open. I know there's a rumor that the town doesn't like adjustments or variances and those kinds of things. And true, that's absolutely, we don't want to go lot by lot. But we're only talking about 4 parcels that we think would meet the types of requirements we're talking about for mixed-use development. And so individually, if Mr. Gupta came up with a plan, a design, his engineers did, that took them to 57% lot coverage, and they made a case that they're doing it to save birds and trees or whatever, they would have an argument. They could come before us and the town council and request a variance or request something like that. So my feeling is is that we need to put some code in place that will encourage people to look at mixed-use development, try to make it work. And if for some reason they can't make that 50 to 55 work, we're not talking about a large, I mean, these are fairly unique situations. In fact, I thought at one point about an overlay for the individual properties. But you know, we're trying to put some code in place for, like you said, almost like a new zoning district. So I think we should move ahead without worrying about whether we're going to cover every instance along the way.
Well, let's
I mean,
start ticking this off here because it's getting, we're two and a change in right now.
The other thing I'd like to say is that with respect, we have an external entity, a property owner that's come to us and said, here's an ordinance we'd like for you to pass. In the meantime, we should be writing our own ordinance,
Well,
as Tony has said.
and I
And I
agree
think
wholeheartedly.
it should take a little time, instead of trying to redline his and add this and subtract that. I think we should do it offline and come up with something that, if he's not willing to propose it as a solution for his property, we should propose it as the betterment of the town to include mixed use.
Well, like I said, this board and the town staff are in an agreement that more needs to be done with this ZTA. I'm not prepared at all to say tonight, I would vote for what's in front of us without.
Yeah, I think we're really close to prepared.
Yeah.
But we're gonna go, we'll add this sentence. No, take that word out.
Well-
We're gonna do this thing, and it would take an hour to try to do that. And I would respectfully request the applicant to either withdraw, or we can do a vote.
Could I ask the applicant back up, maybe to address what you're hearing from us and how you think about 50%? I know how you think, but you gotta bear in mind, this is our town.
I think what you're saying has a lot of rationale. This 50%, 40 here, 60 over here. I can't disagree with that. But as I'm looking at, there's very limited parcels left. We can have different opinions on this. I think Southern Shores is an awesome place, and it's the town councils and the planning boards have done a good job protecting it. But as I look at development, like sometimes you need a little bit more density for things we need, because we have very limited parcels left to help preserve some of the open spaces in the other areas. So I just feel like we need more commercial, we need more multifamily, not necessarily more houses. And there's a parcel here, or there's a few parcels left, 50%, 60%. The only thing is, I can only speak on this. I'm not saying that's not a bad way to move forward. Would it change my potential mindset in the property we have? We'd probably just go ahead and do commercial and do it till the code. And we'd move forward with that at a 50%, particularly a 50% net, which is not only a reduction, but it's a change in the way commercial coverage is looked at. It's a big, just, right or wrong, there's two things there. It's like a double hit from where we are right now. At some point, got to look at the business sense as well, too, and saying as a developer, okay, no, we'll go this route right here. So that's how I feel. I think that it's a rational thought process with the 60, 50, 40, 50. You could take the net out. I mean, that's something you guys can look at another, but like, it's just, that's another, I think that it could be, maybe we can get there. with the 50% if the net was taken out, that word. I think some of the other dimensional requirements, I think most of them were already in effect, if what you're saying. One I had was the 50-foot. My understanding, the 50-foot buffer was from the actual structure, is the way I read it. Maybe I'm wrong. A building, a structure couldn't go that 50-foot from the thing, but I didn't think that parking was counted in that 50-foot. I don't know, maybe Wes can correct. It is, so it's anything?
From a residential, not from all the property lines, it's from a residential zoning district. it
So
would be-
basically our southern lot line right there or something or whatever,
on
not
on your property. It would
We
be
got a
against the
sewer.
Eastern property.
Eastern. All right, we can make that work. If that's the same thing, so that's not a change. You're saying none of the dimensional requirements are a change, if I'm reading you.
What has been suggested as far as the dimension, everything but the lot coverage was already applicable.
Okay, so just to answer that particular thing, I don't see any issues there because it's the same thing that we would have to fall under. I think it does come down to lot coverage. And hope I'm not sounding like unappreciative of your consideration of this. I'm really not. I think you guys are more than open-minded in this conversation about this. But I just want to be truthful up here and not said any, and be like, wow, especially the net. That hurts us. And it's different than the commercial district right now, the way lot coverage is looked at. The 50%, I don't know. I'm not, do we prefer it to be what it is on the commercial? Because I do see it as a commercial. However, it's really a commercial development. I think it should have commercial rules. And I feel like even if it wasn't me, the area would be lucky to have some set of commercial sacrificed for residential units. Just the way I look at it, with just my thoughts on it and how we would, if the net could be taken out, I wouldn't 100% rule out the 50% from my kind of looking at what our intentions would be. I don't know if that's answering your question, but I just haven't thought about it as much in there. I know our current plan wouldn't work that we were looking at for a particular property.
Well, thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Well, I would say that from what I'm hearing, we're getting closer, but I'm not willing to take the net out if I vote for it tonight. I think what's in item 1 and item 2, if the applicant would agree to both of those suggested, recommended conditions, I could vote in favor of recommending this for approval and send to the town council. Anybody else got thought?
Is this the 1 and 2 you're talking about?
No.
I didn't think so.
Go. Sorry.
I was looking at
No,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
My bad.
Yeah.
But I think if the applicant would be in agreement with the recommended additional conditions for mixed-use group development, I would be inclined to recommend for approval. Otherwise, I don't think I would vote for it. Anybody else? Well, then I'm going to make a motion then and move this thing along. I would recommend that we not pass this ZTA as written tonight, and that the recommended be included in a ZTA from the applicant to move on to town council.
Here's a discussion point, okay, and try to make it quick.
So,
Before-
Well, go ahead.
Okay.
But there's a motion on the floor.
There's a motion on the floor. But I can discuss the motion, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That, no less than %, we could actually add that to the ZTA tonight, pass it, and send it on to council.
Basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, instead of Mr. Gupta researching another one, we
Well,
could
he's-
make those changes here, send it on to council, and let council decide. It's just a,
Yeah. Well, then if you look at the ZTA that they are proposing, and
we will not get to it. Yes,
we would put all the dimensions per RS8 and the C general
yeah.
district in there as another item, I suppose, Wes?
Yes, sir. I would say that if you all are going to recommend a different version to the town council, that if you follow the applicant's submittal, which stops at E, if you're not including E, then you would have a new E, which would start with your number 1. And then 2 be F, 3 be G,
Right.
and so
But
forth.
we would disregard E.
If that's, I thought that's what you said a minute ago.
Yeah. Disregard, then add the dimensional requirements per the RS8 and the C general district,
Just a thought.
and then continue on with the lot coverage for mixed-use group development. Can you go up the page a little bit, Wes? No, I'm sorry, go down, yeah. And add parcel area, by definition, is the maximum allowable lot coverage of the net parcel area, and mixed-use group developments, which incorporate the use of permeable pavement as outlined in 362075C, in excess of 5% of the total lot coverage shall be allowed a maximum allowable lot coverage by principal use in all accessory structures of no greater than 55%. So where would that fall in the?
Right. Well, let me, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, can I just make sure I'm understanding?
Yeah.
You all, what the motion is to, you just made the motion to recommend denial of the applicant's submittal.
Of this
correct?
ZTA.
Okay, so, but now you also want to recommend approval of a revised ZTA.
Well, we have to vote on the first one,
I
right?
think if you all, I think first, I would suggest that you all, if you're recommending denial of the applicant's application, that should be one action.
Yeah.
If you all are looking to make a different recommendation, I think that should be done in a separate discussion. If you all are recommending denial of the application, the request is no longer in front of you.
Correct.
But if you all want to make that recommendation, then I understand what you're saying.
I will withdraw my motion, but no second, so I'm going to withdraw my motion. So how do you suggest we go forward if we want to include these recommended additional conditions?
So you all would be recommending denial of ZTA-22-06, period.
We could vote to approve it with the following changes: eliminate E, make that
Yes.
E at FG all the way down to L. If you want.
The applicant needs to accept that
Exactly.
and submit it.
The
Well,
applicant doesn't have any, I mean, it sounded like he was not in agreement with the 50%. So I guess what I'm saying is, it's their request.
Sure.
If you all are looking to recommend that the town consider another ZTA, then I think it might be more appropriate to do that at a later time.
Bless you.
And that would be consistent kind of with what some of the discussion that you would be in favor in. I'm not sure I follow recommending denial of this and moving forward with a different ZTA since the town is not initiated.
In essence, it's adding on more language than is already there. So then go ahead.
You can make an approval based on and add conditions, right? You can say you recommend approval of the CTA and then add
If
these.
you were in favor of what?
Do I have to make a statement on that, or could you not approve it based on these conditions?
You could,
Just based on recommendations, adding these conditions?
I think what Wes is saying is if we rewrite your ZTA, then, we're in essence creating another ZTA. If you're in agreement, then it would go a long way in sending this on to town council.
I think on a majority of the stuff, the dimensions, RS8, the mentioning of maybe putting, I think a lot of what you have, I would be in agreement with. The only thing, you still can put the condition of net. I mean, I would make my argument when it came down to it. But most of it, I was, just for myself, I would be in agreement with. If you guys want to do that.
Wes, once again, what do you see as the path forward coming back and forth to the planning board?
So you would be denying ZTA-22-06, but you would be sounds like you all are of recommending something in addition to ZTA-22-06.
Right. Okay.
Addresses the mixed use. In other words, we need to codify mixed use a little clearer.
If you all want to communicate and try to make it clear what your recommendation is, then it'll go to town council.
Okay, well, I think the recommendation that we've been knocking around is we're fairly much in agreement to the net parcel area and the 50%, 55 if it's permeable pavement. So, and I think from what I'm hearing, so.
I would say it would be two separate votes, two separate motions.
Okay, well, then I will entertain a motion for.
I'll make a motion that we deny ZTA 2206.
I'll second. Any discussion on that?
Can you also, I'm sorry, clarify whether or not it is or is not consistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan?
I would say that,
It's currently not consistent.
yes.
That is not consistent?
I would say that judging by the policy 2, which I read earlier for the LeBlanc, the community values in the town will continue to comply with the founder's original version. It is, I think it's consistent with the town's land use. So yes,
So is that part of Mr. DiBernardo's motion?
Yeah,
you'd be willing to add that?
yeah,
Okay.
it's consistent with the.
Okay, and second, for me, any discussion beyond that? Okay. Aye. Opposed? None seen? Okay. Next motion would be to recommend, and I'll make this motion, to recommend additional conditions for mixed-use group development per items on dimensional requirements, items 1 through 6, lot coverage for mixed-use group development. And I would say that that would be consistent with our current land use plan.
And that would be added, so it would be in order of, it would be added to A through F and it'd start after F.
Leading E and
And
starting.
replacing and starting at E.
Right.
And then that also is changing group development of commercial and residential buildings to mixed
Right.
use group
It-
development of commercial and
Right.
residential buildings.
At the very top of their ZTA,
Yes, sir.
the addition of the word mixed.
Yes, sir.
So it's mixed group development. I mean, it's just housekeeping. Okay, I've made that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Ed seconds. Any discussion on that motion?
Do you have there was talk of a range percentage of use. Is that included in there?
No, one thing that we probably ought to at least suggest would be a use. And I mean, the maximum at 40%.
Well, there's no
Well,
40%.
Correct. We've eliminated the 40%, so we better back up.
Mixed use development.
Yeah, I mean, looking at E, if we left E in, I mean, there's a motion right now to delete it, but if we left E in,
That's about lot coverage.
40% of the lot coverage of the net parcel area can be associated with building footprints containing residential use and the required parking for residential uses. What does that mean to everybody here, 40%? Is that usage or
That's lot coverage.
the footprint? What does E say to you? 40%, no more than 40% lot coverage of the net parcel area can be associated with building footprints containing residential uses. That's 40% residential usage. So I see no harm in leaving E in.
No, I was surprised when,
Yeah, so to amend the motion, Wes, we would leave E in and add on from to our recommended additional condition. And does anybody want to think about a minimum 25,
25%.
which would
It's like
work in there somewhere?
That's common.
Common estate.
Yeah. Okay, so motion, second, discussion, any more discussion? We're gonna rescind taking E out. Okay.
And adding minimum of 25%
25,
to E? To E?
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and add a minimum. You good?
A minimum of 25% and no more than 40%.
Okay, so any more discussion? All in favor of that motion, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Opposed? One. Well, thank you. I mean, it's good. Okay, so that motion carries 4-1 as a recommendation for the applicant and happy town council.
Yes, sir. The application goes to council and your recommendation will also go to council.
Right, okay.
Both recommendations that you've made tonight will go to council.
Yeah, I mean, there's no need in the world to come back for round 5
That's
with
what I
us.
said.
We've done our damage, right?
We don't want to see anymore, actually, you know?
You didn't want to see us either.
What? Okay, well, thank you all for enduring this.
Can I ask a question just on the after this?
So we recommended denial to the town council, right? But there's a separate vote saying that if these conditions are added, you're recommending approval to that. And then, so trying to understand going to the town, the council. Am I speaking on behalf of both recommendations at the town council?
It's a question for,
And we can follow up later. I'm just trying to understand this. We can certainly talk online.
It will be presented as Mr. Gupta's application or Jingad LLC, ZTA. There was a recommendation of denial. However, the planning board did recommend approval of his ZTA with these conditions.
They would vote on our.
And I would say it is not your application.
So I couldn't speak on that.
You can,
I could speak on
but I would
that.
say it's no longer your application. The planning board made a recommendation of it.
But they would have to act on our recommendation first.
Correct.
And then you would come in and say, I'm complying with all the existing.
the planning board has recommended not to approve your ZTA as written with these conditions.
Okay.
We would approve.
I think I understand. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, once again, thank you all for enduring this. A little bit better than a root canal. Okay.
Public comment.
Public comment.
Okay, public comment, would you all care to speak? Like you feel like we let, I'm glad to hear. Okay, noted. Yeah. Yeah. It's spent time. You're more than welcome to tell us anything you feel.
We appreciate the guidance, especially the guidance that you gave us. We appreciate some guidance like that ourselves.
There was some interaction.
There's some
We
interaction.
felt we were,
Mr. Chairman, you explicitly cautioned us at the beginning that you were not going to engage in discussion with us.
Yeah.
And we respected that.
Mhm.
And we abided by it. But the process for the second CTA seemed to be a lot different to us.
Well, it wasn't by design, I can tell you that.
yeah,
It really wasn't. I mean, this has been going on since February. You've been to a couple of meetings. And it truly wasn't by design or showing any favoritism at all. And the net result was that they got turned down as well.
No,
So,
I think, and I appreciate that.
okay.
Obviously,
Well, and you,
but what I would say is that we've learned a lot, perhaps as to how we should go about either formulating future CTAs or future presentations.
Okay.
So in that sense, I'm appreciative.
yeah, well, and we, like I said before, we appreciate
And
it.
you have to say that the job you guys do is,
We try,
It's-
but we're
not easy.
very protective.
Yeah.
And
well.
I'm sorry
you
that it-
basically have outsiders proposing code amendments rather than you drafting the code amendment, which sounds like what you wanted to do with commercial.
I mean, your suggestion to actually come up with a whole zoning category makes a lot of sense to us.
Yes.
And I'm just speaking to the second thing, for what that's for.
Yeah.
But,
Well, if nothing else, we've piqued your way of looking at things, and hopefully you'll come back and participate, because we need participation and people here. I'm disappointed that there weren't more people here tonight. So, anyway, thank y'all. Okay. All right. Okay, planning board member comments.
More than 8 feet.
I'm sorry, I've got to wind this meeting up. We still got agenda items left. Planning board member comments, anybody want to?
No.
Okay, announcements, Wes.
At this point, for next month's meeting, we may have ZTA 2108 signage. And also I'll be in touch with you all soon, a couple of y'all about your terms. There are terms that'll expire on June 30th. I'll be talking to y'all to see if you're still interested or would be interested in serving another term on the board.
Okay. All right, well, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor, aye.
What day is today?
May 19th.
What I was gonna say was the county
Has